Hi, so I'm currently in Scotland and I'm planning a lot of trips within Europe, and I wanted to figure out which camera is the camera for vlogging my trip across Europe. So I have the Canon G7X and the Sony ZV-1. Both of these cameras are super popular with vloggers and TikTokers, but which one is actually worth bringing if you can only bring one? So I've tested out both, and I definitely have some thoughts on both and on which one is best. So let's get into it. First up is the Canon G7X Mark II. This is the OG vlogging camera, and a lot of original, like kind of first wave YouTubers have used this camera for a lot of good reasons. And even with the new vlog cameras coming out there, I understand why this Mark II and Mark III are still a go-to. So right off the bat, the colors on this camera are amazing. Like, hype is totally worth it. Like, it takes super rich, vibrant, like film-like Y2K photos that aren't like washed out and super clinical. The sensor picks up the colors super accurately, produces really rich tones, which is ideal if you want to take like gorgeous and lush looking photos. Also great for party photos, and like kind of you're in Paris and you want kind of like that nighttime Paris Eiffel Tower, like Pinteresty vibe. Super glowy, blingy portraits, like totally, I love like taking photos with this camera. Both the videos and still images look amazing. The hype is totally worth it, like especially if you want the best Instagram photos. If you want to vlog with this, like first, the autofocus is atrocious. Like, it's not ideal for vlogging at all. It's super difficult to focus on something like in your hand, and like it'll take some time to focus. And then if you wanted to like switch to filming your friends or like something else, like a scenic landscape or like a pretty building or something, like they'll likely be out of focus and it will need to take some time to refocus. It also doesn't record videos in 4K, just 180, which can be a plus to some, like if you want something a little bit softer, like not super modern, a bit more of like kind of a retro vintage look. So that resolution is fine, it's just not the sharpest. It's just like overall it's an older camera with older technology, so it can be kind of hard to like get that sharpness and just focus on things, especially if you're moving around, you're walking and filming. So definitely something to keep in mind. Another big issue is just the lack of video stabilization. Like, as you can see in my footage, it's super, super shaky, and you'll need to try and do some like post-processing, like editing to try like improve and balance out the stability. Even if you're kind of like just standing fairly still, there's just also a lot of like micro jitters with the footage. I took a lot of these videos in my hand, so obviously super jittery, but if you use like a tripod or just kind of stand there, or kind of a big like tripod on the ground, the stability might improve. But it's like, again, another thing to keep in mind if vlogging is your primary focus. When I reviewed my footage for my layover in Boston and then my first few days in Scotland, I realized I would need to switch to a different camera for video because I'm more focused on taking videos, and it's just like, it's not ideal for that. So would I take this guy on my trip? Yes, for sure, especially if photos are your number one goal. Like, this is what I would take because it's so easy to just quickly turn this on, adjust a few settings, and then you're off to just taking beautiful, blingy, rich photos. It has a built-in flash, like everything you need for really great photos. Okay, next is the Sony ZV-1. So this camera was literally designed with vlogging in mind, so it has some major advantages for shooting video compared to other cameras. It's also a lot newer, which means you can get a lot of the accessories and things for a lot less. What I love most about this camera for vlogging is the super fast autofocus. So it will lock into your face or onto your face or your subject and will actually stay there. Like, if you, again, kind of using that example, you're strolling like the streets of Rome with like your gelato and you want to like, you know, film your gelato in your hand and then kind of like do a scenic view of like the Colosseum. Also has better stabilization than the G7X. So maybe not as great as like a handy cam or something a bit more professional, but for the price, it's great. It can get a little shaky, like if you're walking around just holding it in your hand, so I might recommend like getting a little mini tripod. If you're gonna do like a lot of walking around. I'm also just like kind of a jittery person, so my footage just automatically isn't super stable. It's got a little bit of shakiness to it. Another big reason why I love the Sony ZV-1 is you can set it up to have like a bit of a background blur, kind of like a light bokeh effect, which gives it a bit more of like a cinematic feel. I also love that it has skin softening filters, so it will automatically kind of like give your footage that soft cinematic feel, which like pairs really perfectly with traveling because it's kind of like that soft, dreamy look to it, like if you set it up this way. The downsides to this one is that the battery life isn't amazing, so you're definitely going to want to plan on bringing like backup batteries if you plan on being out for a few hours. But the good thing is the batteries are super inexpensive and easy to find. The downside to it is that it doesn't have a built-in flash, but it does have a hot shoe, which is something the G7X doesn't have. So you can set up your little external mic. If you want to take photos with this, you can get an external flash, again, for super inexpensive. Towards higher like 4K videos, so compared to something like the G7X, the videos will be a lot sharper. It can be more modern looking, which some people have an issue with, but I'll kind of show you how to make your footage not so clinical. Would I take this on my trip? Yes, definitely. You can buy an external flash and set up the settings to get photos very similar to the style of the G7X. So you can kind of like easily reproduce that aesthetic of photos with this guy if you get an external flash. I love the dreaminess and cinematic feel of the footage, and vlogging is just super easy because it's a bit more stable and has great autofocus. So which one is better? You really can't go wrong with both. They're super similar in size, you can fit them both in like a larger coat pocket or like a little purse. Like size isn't really like a big kind of differentiator between the two. They both take amazing photos, and like I've constantly said, you can reproduce that G7X look on the Sony ZV-1. It might not be as easy as just like popping out the G7X, but it's definitely doable. The secret to the ZV-1 is turning the sharpness in your settings all the way down to get that softer handy cam look to it, and it will mimic that more like kind of Y2K glowy look that the G7X has. You can also like do some post-processing to adjust the footage and the colors. You can also add lens filters like glimmer glass or soft FX to give it more of like a softer aesthetic and not so like modern and clinical. The differentiator between the two is just like the price and availability of the G7X. The main focus of your trip is like vlogging. I would take the Sony ZV-1. As I said earlier, you turn the sharpness down, you turn the contrast to -1, getting glimmer glass. It will reproduce that same Y2K aesthetic as the G7X. But this has significantly better autofocus, leagues above the G7X. It's more stable. If you plan on walking around, kind of vlogging the sights, filming your friends, filming things that you're doing, this is the one to get. This is my go-to because there's so many new editing tools out there and like presets that will help you edit your footage to replicate that kind of OG kind of effortless look of the G7X. You can get DaVinci Resolve, just a lot of like kind of presets and filters. You can add lens filters on this for very little cost to just like replicate that footage, but still have like amazing autofocus, much better stability. But it's really up to you and kind of like what your vlogging style is. If you love the effortless point and shoot filming and kind of OG feel, I would go with the G7X if you can find it, especially if you're not like intending to film while walking around and are more interested in kind of taking still stable videos using a tripod. I would go with that, but there's a lot of restrictions with video for the G7X. Again, if you want kind of like a more cinematic aesthetic, I think the dreaminess of this really lines up with traveling. I would go with the Sony ZV-1. Personally, I take this one around whenever I'm vlogging. This one, my G7X, ever since I've got the ZV-1, I haven't really used this. I hope that this really long, chaotic review helped you decide which camera to bring. It's just really kind of up to your preference, up to your priorities, and also kind of if you're on a deadline, you're leaving in a few months, you might not find a G7X in time, so definitely recommend Sony ZV-1 as something that can do both.